Hey guys, I have a little something deep for you this week that is going to be surprisingly relevant to you, I believe. I said earlier this year in my word for 2015 that Christology is going to be a big focus this year. Not that people are going to get it, they've never gotten it, but it's what we need to catch hold of to save us from a world of trouble. I mean, we could have saved ourselves 2,000 years of religious redundancy and idiotic thinking if we just grab hold of the concept of who Jesus is. You know, every church that Paul ever planted ended up in one of two errors, either legalism or gnosticism. But a strong dose of Christology, an understanding of the being of who Jesus is, blows both of these things out of the water. Now, I am not just talking about some intellectual, theological blather. No, how we think about God affects our entire life. How we think in general affects our life. If you think you're a dog, you're going to eat your own feces. If you think you're a king, you'll start walking upright. So what we believe about God is paramount. Now, Jesus Christ is the declaration that God and man are inseparably united. He is not just the message of our union with God, like portraying a union with God. He is the substance and the living connection of that union itself. He's alive. He's real. You see, Christology is not about just what Jesus did in his saving act. It's not about what he accomplished on the cross or the dynamics of how he worked miracles, as important as that stuff may be. It is not about the good example he gave us, as in WWJD, what would Jesus do? It's not about teaching us how to live a better life. It's not even altogether about his activity as being Lord, as in what you need to obey him because he's the king. You can say Jesus is Lord until the cows come home, but still be a diehard legalist trying to obey the CEO, and you work your way into his favor because you don't really know who he is. No, Christology is not about what Jesus did. Christology is concerned with the nature and person of who he is, his being as the Christ. Think of his being and not his doing. Think of the incarnation, not just of his activity. He, in his existence, holds together the divine nature and the human nature in one unmingled person. When I talk about his nature, even then we get mixed up, because I don't just mean his nature in that, oh, Jesus was good-natured, he was a nice guy. Then we jump right into thinking and doing again, in a sense of trying to be a nice guy and emulate his niceness. No, to speak of Christology, I mean the essence of his being, existing as the God-man. It's not just that God was wrapped up in him, but because he exists, God is permanently united to our humanity. You see, in the incarnation, it's not just that God was fully bound up in Jesus, but that he bound the entire created order to himself. As the last Adam, he bonded our humanity to the divine. It's not just that Jesus existed as an individual, but he comprises all of our humanity and presents us perfect before the Father. You are one with God simply because Jesus exists, not because you believe he exists, and definitely not because you've compiled some questionable list of half-hearted good deeds. The question of who is Jesus has massive ramifications to all of us, to you. Not just the ramifications of what you need to do because he's the boss. I'm talking about ramifications as to who you are, because thanks to the incarnation, your flesh has been bonded to the living God. I'm not saved because I asked for it or because I ever voted on the matter. I am saved because Jesus exists as the union of God and my own humanity. Is this a mystery? Yes. Are you going to wrap your head around it in one 10-minute teaching? Of course not. But when we get our eyes off of our own spiritual activity and onto Jesus, when we become Christocentric and not humanistic, digging around in our own belly, trying to figure out what we need to do to bridge some non-existent gap, well, we actually start to cheer up a little bit and experience something called the life of faith. This whole concept of example Jesus is what has been having us do loop-de-loops in the desert under Moses, to strictly focus on imitating Jesus as our example. has us working our head off under the law. We think Jesus showed us how to be sad, how to kill ourselves, how to fast ourselves into non-existence. And for the legalist, he is crossing his T's and jotting his I's, trying to replicate Christ and therefore present himself holy before God in his own righteousness, which is an impossibility. There is, in a real sense, an imitation of Christ. And yes, in one sense, he is our example. But that is by no means the gospel message. Jesus did not come just to be your example. He came to be your substitute. He was a man of sorrow so we could be a people of joy. He fasted so that we could feast. He was broken so we could be made whole. He was made poor so we could be made rich. By his stripes we were healed. He stepped into our blindness to the Father's love on the cross so that we could see. He died so that you could live. You did not have him coming just to die for you. He did not die just for you. He died as you. He died your death once and for all. Jesus is our substitute in every way. Now, don't get that confused with the twisted idea of penal substitution, in which the Father poured his bloodlust and his wrath on the Son, where Jesus was somehow twisting the Father's arm to love you, okay? Jesus wasn't dying to save you from God. He was saving you from your own sinfulness. On the cross, he entered into your psychological calamity when you feel abandoned by the God who doesn't abandon anybody. And he took upon himself your sense of rejection, your insecurity, your alienation, your separation, your disease, your corruption, your decay, your hard-headed stubbornness, rebellion, darkness, and he swallowed it all up into uncreated light, sucked all of our sinfulness down into the black hole of his own broken servant body, and spit us right back out the other side of the grave, a brand spanking new creation. And he poured his Spirit out on all flesh, not just on the assemblies of God, not just on the Episcopalians, but on all of humanity. And the Spirit is now moving upon all of the human mass, trying to awaken them to the revelation of their identity in Jesus and their union with God. He is all in all. He is through all. He holds all things together in him, whether we realize it or not, whether we are living according to that truth or not. So, for the legalist, trying to accomplish this union on his own by working harder or conjuring up enough faith, well, that is as impossible as pushing a wheelbarrow up the mountain of infinity. You can't make this union happen. You can only discover it. But on the other hand, you also have the Gnostics. The charismatic church is chock full of Gnosticism. Now, I love charismatic stuff, the whack, healing, all this stuff. But you see, Gnostics see this physical world as a cage that they must somehow ascend beyond to become spiritual. So, of course, they vilify the natural world, abstaining from marriage, food, money, anything material that is considered unspiritual. And a charismatic is never spiritual until he's done a 40-day fast or given all of his money away to somebody or whatever. But Gnostics also believe that they are saved by some sort of secret knowledge. And this is inherent to this whole thing. I mean, that is the core of Gnosticism. Gnosticism means essentially saved by gnosis, by knowledge. And I don't mean just by theology. Charismatics hate theology. I mean, look, what are charismatics really into? If you want a platform in the prophetic camp, all you need to do is drum up some weird insight or bizarre revelation that nobody's ever heard of. And the weirder your message, the more popular you are, because people always feel like they're missing out. And they're looking for some sort of hidden key for their breakthrough. So you invent the name of some make-believe demon, like a water spirit or a kundalini spirit, and people think, oh, that's what's been holding me back spiritually. That's what's making our nation go apostate. I never heard any revelation about water spirits. And just as they did in Paul's day, people become obsessed with angels and cosmic beings and things that they have absolutely no real knowledge about. It's all imagination and fairy tale. But as Paul said in Colossians 2, these guys speak of what they don't even know. And they've lost connection with the head, which is Christ. Of course, they give lip service to Christ, but let me tell you, everything is about Christ. Am I saying angels don't exist? Am I saying there's no such thing as interaction with angels? By no means. But as soon as we start going down that road of focus, we lose the plot altogether. The second you're bored with Jesus, you are about to get inundated with all sorts of hocus pocus, super spiritual hoops that you're going to need to jump through in order to transcend to become a really anointed person. You need to meet with the spirit of Melchizedek or Enoch or something. And otherwise, we think we're missing out. We're going to miss our destiny or miss out on the abundant life. And some of you are aware that recently a major ministry publicly brought correction to a certain individual. And I'm not talking about me. I mean, this guy has honestly been preaching pure sorcery for years. But a lot of people are. I mean, the guy literally thinks he's gone to Mars, communicates with aliens. Everything is vision this and imagination that. He's lost touch with the concrete world. Part of it is probably just a medical condition of paranoid schizophrenia. And I don't say that to demonize. I'm just saying, talking with him is like having a conversation with like a homeless guy I've met in Santa Cruz on the street who are literally crazy. Full of conspiracy theories about the Illuminati that's out to get him. And it's like watching one of these weird History Channel shows. Everything is about secret societies and literally thinks that the CIA is out to get him. He believes there are literally reptilians. Anyone in a place of power like the Queen of England or Beyonce is a reptilian. He thinks the devil is after your DNA, and they say not even to leave your fingernail clippings in a hotel room because the devil will get... the list goes on. And where is Jesus in this mix? Well, of course, Jesus is just an example. A man like us who somehow transcended and transfigured just to demonstrate to us what we need to do to transcend and transfigure and become spiritual. So salvation gets thrown right back into your own lap. Example Jesus, not the concrete Son of God who exchanged our human existence for the divine life on our behalf in one fell swoop. Plenty of people have gotten upset at this one big ministry who denounced this guy. But to be honest with you, this guy only represents the tip of the iceberg. He represents the natural evolution of where all of this charismatic Gnosticism is eventually going to take you. Until you see Jesus as the final sum of your own personal spirituality, you will continue to look for something weirder, something stranger, something more off-kilter to produce a result in your life. Because not 1 ounce of it is never going to be satisfactory enough. You see it in the basic renewal chant of the charismatic church. More Lord, always trying to get more of a God that you already have every bit of thanks to Jesus. There is a more Lord, but it's more of a revelation. It's not more of a God that I don't have. It's more of a discovery of the fullness of God that you already have in your belly thanks to Jesus. That's the real more Lord. Again, this is exactly what Paul said in Colossians 2 when he's dealing with Gnosticism. He's like, thanks to your union with Jesus, you have all of God, the fullness. So some guys will bash the extremist on the one hand and yet still beg for more of God on the other hand. If you don't know who Jesus is, and in a sense of the complete, already given sum of your spirituality, then your quest for more will of course lead you eventually to battling imaginary dragons or climbing into the, quote, courts of heaven to make things happen, or whatever the latest charismatic trend is. In Paul's day, it was about celebrating new moons or not eating certain foods or getting themselves circumcised, whatever it's going to be. You will always be aching and never satisfied. But the flavor of the gospel is not a continual hunger for more. It is a complete satisfaction in Christ and what He has accomplished. It is not a continual thirst. Jesus said, you drink of these waters, you will never thirst again. Are you still hungry? Well, hey, was Jesus not a good enough meal? I'm not saying that if you're bored at your current level of spirituality, that you may as well just plateau and deal with it. What I'm saying is, if you are bored, it's not because you're lacking something. It's not because you need more Lord. If you're bored, it's because you're still just sniffing the cork of what you already have inside of you. But the gospel is not just your intro initiation rite into a lifelong journey of spiritual climbing. The gospel's not just an intro program you learn in Sunday school and then the rest is up to you. No, the gospel is the scandalous announcement that you have already arrived, and it doesn't doesn't make sense to us when we seem to have trouble in our lives, but a lot of our trouble is there simply because we don't believe that we already have a victory that's taken place. I am thankful that people are starting to wake up and call some of this stuff out. But even the big ministry that called this fellow out, I mean, I see them getting accused on Facebook. Oh, they're judging this guy, but this guy is light years ahead of their ministry spiritually. Well, look, right there, you've just declared yourself a Gnostic and not a Christian. There is no further ahead than other people in this gospel. There are no levels. There's no ladder or scale of ascent. There is Christ crucified. I have resolved to know nothing. I am an expert in the knowledge of nothing. I have a doctorate in the awareness of jack diddly squat, but Christ and Him crucified. If Jesus isn't enough, then you go chase down Marvin the Martian, try to kill Puff the Magic Dragon, make sure the CIA is not tapping your phone lines because you're so friggin' spiritual. Look, I am all for the weird. I am all for the wacky. Buddy, believe me, I am all about experiential, tangible spirituality. We see unusual, crazy miracles and healings all the time. But I am not preaching my imagination. I'm preaching Jesus. I'm not preaching steps and formulas. I'm done. I'm tired, okay? I am absolutely done running and chasing the bizarre just to scratch an itch that only Jesus can and has delivered on. If you ever listen to a speaker who makes you feel less spiritual than them, if you ever walk away from a meeting feeling like you lack something or that you're missing out or that you need to start waking up earlier at 4 a.m. to press in and arrive at that guy's level, then I promise you, my friend, you did not just hear the gospel in that meeting. There will forever be a human being seated in the Godhead. And there you are, woven into the humanity of Jesus Christ, sat right up in the Trinity of God. In Jesus, we see the Godward movement toward humanity and the human movement toward God fully consummated in one person. He didn't just show you how to do it, He did it as you, and He fully exists as you before the Father. I honestly don't care if you like it. And I'm not going to lose any sleep if you think I'm being too harsh on the idolatrous system of spiritual advancement that you have constructed. You can slap a fish on the bumper of that old do-it-yourself Humpty that you're driving and call it a new level of Christianity. But my friend, it is the same old package. My friend, Jesus is not just a footnote in this operation. The cross is not just a doorway into greater glory, not an initiation rite you receive and then get launched out in developing your own version of a walk with God. Jesus is your walk with God. He lived out your repentance, your baptism, your right living, and He presents you completely whole. All you can do now is wake up to it, start to change your mind, and I promise you, your actions are going to change as well. But your spirituality is not the sum of your actions. Jesus is. Well, John, you sound like a broken record. You're talking about Jesus all the time. Thank you for the compliment. I have lost all interest in insanity, okay? This message has driven me insane enough. He is all in all. Christ in you, the hope of glory. Lord, I pray that the revelation of who you are in your very being would begin to dismantle all the legalistic moralisms and the charismatic voodoo, doo-doo, all of the bewitchment and bamboozlement of what we need to do to get closer to you or to be like you or to try to make your kingdom happen. I thank you, Father, for the reality that as you are, so are we in this world, and it is not our fault. I thank you that we lack absolutely nothing and that we are full of the Godhead, and it is not our fault. I love you guys. And hey, check this out. Look what we have going on. Visit our homepage, thenewmystics.com, and see that we've just done a major overhaul to our entire online web store, adding a number of new downloadable full-length teachings you can access on any device. Click on the store. You'll be able to find links to our books, audiobook, ebook, our MP3 JoyPod player, and more. Click the audio teachings to see tons of new additions as well as some old favorites. Also, back on our homepage, there are 2 ways that you can navigate around to find our upcoming events. If you click on our conferences page, you'll see that we have some special events and tours coming up, like a last-minute conference for Anchorage, Alaska this summer. I'm doing a 4-city tour to the UK in September. Our Mega Grace Tour comes to the East Coast cities of North America. We have a special event in Washington, and in December, I'll be in 5 cities in Australia and New Zealand. Then I'll finally be coming back to South Africa next January for a tour there as well. And our other event page features primarily our mystical schools. Here you'll find all of our 3-day supernatural intensives. I'll be in Jacksonville, Florida, May 15 through 17. I'll be in Chicago, Illinois at the end of May, Grand Rapids, Michigan in June. I'm coming to Calgary, Canada in July, Phoenix, Arizona in July. And after the UK tour, I'll be back in Gibraltar on the Mediterranean, September 25 through 27. I'll be in Louisville, Kentucky, October 9 through 11. We sometimes throw our other tours on this page, so again, you find our East Coast event in Toronto, Boston, Maryland, Alabama, the events in Washington, Australia, New Zealand, and in January, my first ever mystical school coming to Norway. Find it all at thenewmystics.com.